My Lords, I rise to offer Green support for the general trend of all of these amendments and also join the rest of the House in wishing the Noble Lord True a quick recovery. And I very much agree with the comments from the Noble Lord Scriven and disagree with the Noble Lord Hodgson. If someone is here contributing to society, a part of society, maybe that's only 20 or 30 years, and maybe they will eventually go back to another country that they came from to care for their elderly parents, whatever reason. But while a person is here as part of this community, contributing to it, they should have a say. They have chosen to make this their home, and we should recognise that with the vote. Now, I think it's really interesting if we look at the overall direction of the context of this bill, and I very much agree with the comments of the Noble Lord Wallace of the general sense of confusion and the lack of real sense of clear direction. But where there is a sense of direction, it's utterly the wrong direction. Because as we were talking about with voter ID and as we were talking about offering a positive alternative of automatic voter registration, we've actually seen a trend over centuries for more and more people to have the right to vote. Yet what we've actually done right now with the Brexit situation, with the rules as they currently are, with this bill without these amendments, is fewer and fewer people are having the right to have a say. That's a diminution of what democracy we actually have. And I think that you very much agree with the Noble Viscount Stansgate comment about if you're able to vote, you should be able to stand. And I would also point out that there's a really interesting case study related to that, of the kind of tangles that electoral law can get themselves into. Because actually between 1918 and 1928, there were certain groups of women who could stand but not vote. That was the Qualification of Women Act of 1918, which with 27 words is the shortest law on the statute books, and actually created this rather strange tangle where women were able to stand, and indeed some women did stand when they couldn't vote for themselves. So that really is an illustration of how you can get yourself into a mess when things aren't properly thought through. Now, I've got some very specific questions, and I'm aware that the Noble Earl, the Minister, has kind of been landed with this, so I entirely understand if you might wish to write to me later about this. But I think one of the things that perhaps many of us in your Lordship's House don't think about very much, but there's another reason to be on the electoral roll beyond voting. And it's something that I will confess I've used many times on the doorstep to encourage people to go on the electoral roll, which is the fact that being on the electoral roll is good for your credit rating. It actually improves your access to credit. So one of the things that we've actually done with this current change that we're creating is we're going to have made access to credit more difficult for some people, such as EU citizens who don't qualify for the vote. Now, I think as we're seeing all of these complications and all of this situation, I wonder if the government has really looked at this situation and considered whether that is appropriate to allow that situation to continue when we're randomly taking that right away from people. Now, another question that I wanted to lay on, and I'm not going to go through, we've already heard very clearly laid out from a range of Noble Lords, particularly Noble Lord Shipley and the Noble Baroness Lady Ritchie, all of the complicating factors about whether you're allowed to be on the electoral roll or not. Is the government confident that it's given full and clear instructions to all of the local authorities in the land to ensure that they are able to implement this effectively, that people are on the roll rightly when they should be on the roll? And I would point out that with local elections coming up, I'm sure all of us, except perhaps the crossbenchers, know people who are out now knocking on doors, talking to voters and potential voters. Is there a place where the government has set this all out very clearly so that if you're out as a political campaigner encouraging people to get involved, they can find a place where it's very clear who is eligible to vote and who isn't? Because I think that would be a very useful practical resource to have. And further to that, this is something that's just occurred to me as we've been going through the debate. I would imagine that to vote when you don't have the right to vote is an offence. But is the government going to provide directions to acknowledge that it may be that some people with the best will in the world, with no ill intention, end up actually voting in this coming or future elections when they don't have the right? And I think people in that situation should be protected, given the complexities that we've all just heard outlined. Just two other points briefly that I wanted to make, very specific points. I think it was the Noble Lord Wallace in an earlier group noted that how Scotland has given refugees the right to vote. And I wonder if the government has not considered, given the situation that we're seeing with a world with more and more refugees, and indeed, we hope, welcoming more refugees here, whether that's something the government's considered. And I also, and I should declare my position as co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Hong Kong here, BNO passport holders, of course, have the right to vote. But the children of BNO passport holders won't have the right to vote. So you could literally have someone who was born in Hong Kong one day who has the right to vote. The person born in Hong Kong one day later won't. So has the government considered the situation of the children of BNO passport holders who've come here with their parents now, and the situation of, the government said from September it's looking to allow the children of BNO passport holders to come on their own, whether that might not be another group to consider? And since I've just introduced several other layers of complexity, isn't really the obvious situation to base this right to vote on residents, people who've made themselves part of the community, contributing to the community? That should be the basis of the right to vote.